Welcome to the Daily Dawg podcast for Saturday, August 30th. And guess what, folks? It is game day. The long, terrible nightmare of no college football has finally ended. The sad truth of college football is that we're only guaranteed the set schedule. You never know if you'll make the postseason. You never know if you'll make a championship game, something like that. I was listening to SportsCenter this evening. Dabo Sweeny was on with Scott Van Pelt, and Dabo just kept talking about how crazy it is that you do all this work and put all this time and effort in for just 12 chances a year to play. These guys do all this work, all this recruiting. The coaches put all the energy and the effort in. The guys work in the off season, the guys work in preseason, and then get ready for game day practices and all of this so they can make 12 games guaranteed each year. And that's really pretty amazing. As fans, I think we feel that too. As fans, we pine for more football. We want to enjoy football all the time, but we only get these 12 weeks of games. This year spread out over about 14 weeks because we have 2 off weeks. And then, of course, we hope and expect to have a shot, like we have much over the last several seasons, to be in the SEC championship game, and then we're looking ahead to playoffs. So there is, a strong chance at 14, 15, 16 games this season. But you start, and Dabo made this point, you only start with 12 guaranteed, and you have to earn the rest. And I think that was a great point. So here we are, game week 1, as I've been calling it all week, 1 of 12 that we know of, guaranteed. We'll hopefully earn the rest, as Dabo has said. But we start off this week. So we are super excited to finally have a game to talk about. And we've covered a lot of ground on that, and we know this isn't going to be a super competitive game, and we know what we're looking for in this. So today I thought what we'd do is we'll run through a little perspective. And by perspective, I mean we can take a look at history and a few things. A couple things I was thinking about are what have the openers looked like since Kirby Smart took over? What kind of games were they? What's been going on? Where are we historically over the last number of years? We start out at number 5 this season, looking at national titles. I was just looking at some of this history stuff, and I really wasn't going to dig into this. And, part of me wanted to let it go. It's always fun to tease Auburn. And I still, I don't know. Every Georgia fan, I think, comes to their sense of rivalries, as Georgia has a lot of rivals, I think, compared to other schools. Some schools are just sort of locked in on 1 or 2. We seem to have a huge list of rivals, and which is great. It makes it fun. There's always something to brag about, something to be concerned about. But for most all of my time, and especially since I have friends that went to Auburn, and I think there was such a direct comparison when I first went to Georgia and became a diehard Georgia fan. The comparison between Georgia and Auburn was very equal, and they almost had what was about that time 80 something 90 years of games. They had almost completely split the series, and amazingly, when I first started looking at it, I was blown away by the fact that even the point totals in the series, when you looked at it, were almost dead even. And obviously, over the last several years, Georgia has sprinted out to a little bit of a lead. We've no longer quite even in the series. It's now like we're up about 8 games in the series. The point totals are no longer that close. And it's just a reflection that we've been able to have a long positive run against Auburn. But they had a fairly positive run against us when I was, from the time I was a freshman going forward. So we actually fell behind by a few games and then caught up, and then it went back and forth, and now Georgia's pulled ahead. But let's take a look at a couple things. And I guess the first one I want to think about, I alluded to this the other day, is what Georgia's place in history. And I was a history major with a comparative literature minor. I mentioned that in some of the writings that, I really am like digging deep into stuff and really analyzing and talking about it. And hence I'm bringing this forward, and I'm applying that to one of my favorite subjects in all time, which is Georgia football, Georgia athletics in general. In the non-football season, we'll get into other athletics, and we'll talk about the Georgia athletic department as a whole, which I've always been really proud of. And one thing just not sure everybody realizes, we had 3 national championships last year. We'll get to that at a different time. Obviously, it wasn't in football, but so we'll circle back around to that and talk about that. But for right now, I really enjoy the process of looking at the history of college football and the history of the programs. Georgia gets listed up there as one of the perennial favorites, you might hear it said, or one of the blue bloods of college football, one of the haves versus the have-nots. And a lot of that is based on historical record, what we've done and what we've accomplished. Some of it is based on, when they talk about the haves, have-nots, just that we live in this talent-rich state. So our school it's often been said, if we just recruit the state of Georgia well, that we will have an excellent team. And that has been true a lot of the time, although Kirby has expanded the recruiting nationally. A lot of our players have come from all over the country. But we do have a lot of talent here in Georgia. We have a lot of talent in the Southeast. It's one of the reasons the SEC is so dominant with their teams up and down, and also just dominant how many players from Georgia, from Alabama, and from all the SEC schools end up in the pros in the NFL. There's just a lot of talent in this part of the country, and even kids that are not already in this part of the country want to come to this part of the country to establish themselves and play football. And you can understand that. Once upon a time when I was a kid, and long before I was a kid, Nebraska, was a dominant team, and they've been trying to get back, now for a while. And they did win their game. They played on Thursday night, and they played Cincinnati in a neutral site game at Arrowhead Stadium in Kansas City, when Travis Kelce and Taylor Swift, the newly engaged couple, was there to watch. And they won their game. Nebraska did. It was not a resounding win. I think they eked it out like 20-13, I think. But they did win. And, the question is, can Nebraska get back? But you can see the challenges they have to ever get back to being an elite team. I mean, if you have a choice to play football in Florida or Georgia or Texas, even Alabama, when you think about the weather and the proximity to, great things like cities like Atlanta and Austin and Miami and Orlando, those kind of places, even Nashville, where would you want to play? Or do you want to go to Lincoln, Nebraska? And when I say Lincoln, Nebraska, I know that a lot of you can probably visualize roughly where Nebraska is in the country. Can you even try to imagine where Lincoln is and what it's closest to? I mean, if I asked you to pick the biggest city within 200 miles of Lincoln, can you do that? I mean, obviously, I guess it's maybe not that hard. A lot of people know Omaha, Nebraska is the largest city in Nebraska, but and Lincoln's kind of outside of Omaha. I've actually been out there, but anyway, point being is, it's a harsh climate, just flat cornfields. That's why they're the Cornhuskers. Flat corn land, and not much to look at, and not a great place to be in the winter. So, once upon a time when football was a different game, they were very competitive, and especially when the game was, get big guys on offensive line and defensive line and just mow people over and run the ball. But in today's game, where you have to have elite quarterbacks and wide receivers and a lot of skill out there on the field, they're not necessarily growing that skill in Nebraska. And if you're pitching the idea of, hey, come play for us, I think it's a tough sell to pitch coming to play in Nebraska. They've got the history, they got fans, they got the stadium, and they probably have money to throw at it these days too, but I think it's still a tough sell. So what I wanted to throw some perspective on is, I mentioned this the other day, Texas is ranked number 1 in the AP poll right now. And one of those little historical markers that I like to look at is Georgia has, in the history of the program, been ranked number 1 54 weeks. And that's kind of a stat that people keep track of when they're looking at the historical, how good is a program in terms of its in history. Where does it rank? Where does it stack up? So 54 weeks at number 1 puts Georgia inside the top 10 and 9th all time as far as weeks at number 1. You'll be shocked to know that Alabama is the number 1 team at number of weeks at number 1 at 141 weeks in the history of the AP poll. The AP poll goes back to 1936. So in the history of the AP poll, Alabama has been ranked, at least for a week, 141 weeks. Second is Ohio State at 106, Oklahoma at 101, and then Notre Dame is 98, USC at 91, Florida State, amazingly, it just shows you how good their run was in the 90s, 80s, 90s, when they were able to have so many great teams. 72 weeks at number 1. I mean, here's a team that didn't even start playing football until the middle of the 1900s. So unlike Georgia or Alabama or Ohio State, have been playing football for well over 100, 120 years. So amazing run there by Florida State. Nebraska, who I was just talking about, that's why I was referencing them. They're 7th all time, 70 weeks at number 1. Miami, also a school that started playing football in the mid-century, last century, and 68 weeks at number 1. They're 8th, so that's who we're trying to catch. We're at 54, and they're at 68. So 14 weeks. We would have to be number 1 without them getting another week at number 1 to catch them. That's a lot. And I'll give you a little perspective on that in a minute. But Texas is right behind us at 10th. It was 49. They've already ticked off another one. They're already number 1 in the current AP poll. So they've got a new week of number 1. So now they're up to 50. So they're only 4 weeks behind us. So it's an interesting question. I wonder what you guys think. If you get a chance and you want to throw comments in or somehow give me some feedback, I'd love to know what people think about, would you rather see the SEC prevail in tomorrow's big Texas-Ohio State matchup and have the SEC, it just means more perspective, where the SEC beats down the Big Ten. Hopefully yet again. The Big Ten's been crowing a lot in this offseason, having won back-to-back national championships with Michigan and Ohio State, and breaking the string of the many SEC championships that we were a part of in the national championships. So should we as SEC fans and Georgia fans want to see Texas go in there and win that game and take down Ohio State and take them down a peg, especially since they just won that national championship in the last game they played? So losing the very next game would be kind of fun, right? Or, as a Georgia fan, selfishly, do you want to preserve your place in history as the 9th best team all time in weeks ranked number 1? Because if Texas gets through this game, then they got a much better shot of catching or surpassing us, depending on how the season goes, right? So if they lose this game, they're going to fall back out of number 1. And even if they win the national championship, they might not make it all the way back to number 1 until the end of the season. So maybe we keep our record if Texas bounces out of this game. So I'm not really sure. I don't have an answer for that. And I don't even want to sway you guys right now. If you're out there and you're listening and you're thinking about it, I'd love for you to find some, communicate to me, send some comments, whatever, direct message, any way you can. But let me know what you think about that, because I'd be interested to know what people think. Maybe I'll even think of a way to do a poll on that. But although by the time I do that, it'll be too late. The game will have been played. But we could still look for Texas to lose somewhere else. But I could look at their schedule and we could talk about how likely that is. But we'll get to that in a little bit. I didn't cue that up as one of the discussion topics. Behind Texas, by the way, is Florida at 11th all time with 41 weeks at number 1. And again, when you think about how hard it is to stay number 1 for multiple weeks or long numbers of weeks, or to be a team that's worthy of being number 1, how few teams spend time at number 1 in a given season, you can really realize that these gaps are pretty big and they're not going to move a lot. But here's the perspective I want to give you. Kirby Smart has changed the way our team, or re-elevated, out of the 40s and again in the 80s, Georgia had runs that established it among those blue blood programs. And Georgia being a founding member of the SEC and one of the longtime teams as far as winning SEC championships, even if there wasn't a ton of national championships, gives Georgia this sort of status in the blue blood category. But part of what you have to do to maintain that blue blood status is to win and to accumulate these historical markers. Weeks at number one, national championships, SEC championships, weeks ranked in the AP top 25 period, weeks in the top 10, weeks in the top 5. These are all different markers, 10-win seasons, 12-win seasons, stuff like that. So these are things that get used when the historians of college football and the commentators want to take a look at it and say, who are the best teams of all time? And Georgia has always been hanging out in that area somewhere between, in all of my lifetime, between 10 and 15-ish and sometimes a little more like 12 to 15 in terms of that ranking of the best programs all time. When you look at all-time wins, all-time rankings, stuff like that, national championships. So bagging a pair of back-to-back national championships, being one of the very few teams to ever win back-to-back national championships, elevating our claimed national championship numbers up to 4, gives us some credibility. And then these weeks at number 1, weeks in the top 25, double-digit win seasons, all these things that have stacked up really big in these last 4, 5, 6 years have made a big difference. And so to give you some perspective on that, prior to the recent run where we ascended to number 1 in the 2021 season and maintained or bounced in and out of number 1 or maintained a long streak of number 1 through the 2023 season, we had a total at that point of 15 weeks at number 1. So we've gone to 54 and previously been 15 weeks. So Kirby has been part of bringing us 39 weeks at number 1. So that's a big deal when you stop and think about it. Again, think about the perspective here. So I'll go down the list and tell you where 39 is by itself. Let's see. Just those 39 weeks would put you in 12th place. LSU sits all time in 12th place at weeks at number 1 at 38. So just the weeks that Kirby has provided us since he took over would actually be the 12th best amount of weeks at number 1 for a program in all of history. So, and obviously, given our 120-year plus history of football, when I tell you that all of those 39 weeks were logged between 2021 and 2023, that gives you some real perspective to look back at the entire rest of the history of Georgia football and realize we had 15 weeks. And most of those 15 weeks, 11 of those weeks came in a similar kind of run that Vince Dooley authored when he was coach in the 1980 and 82 seasons. So we had a run very similar to the 2021, 22, and 23 run where, and this is not new to you guys. You guys know this. You know about Herschel Walker, Vince Dooley. You know about the 1980 National Championship. Not everybody realizes that we were in that top 5, top 10 for a lot of the 81 season, although Clemson beat us early in the season that year and stayed undefeated and went on to win the 81 National Championship. But then we bounced back in 82 and had a run back up to number 1, and we're at number 1 and had a shot to win the national championship again and largely lost it in the bowl game right at the end. So I'll save that as a longer detailed discussion for another day, looking at some of the historical games of significance, something I plan to do probably more in the off season since we have so much to talk about during the season. But during that run of 80, 81, 82, we logged 11 weeks at number 1 then. So you had 3 weeks at number 1 all the way back in the 1942 season, which is one of our claimed 4 national championship seasons. And then you had 11 weeks in the 80, 81, 82 season. And then there was 1 week at number 1. Some of you might remember this. I would put this out as a trivia question if we were all just sitting around chatting, or I'd throw it out and ask somebody to raise hand and say, "Can you tell me where the other week of number one came from?" and see who remembers this. We started the 2008 season as the preseason number one, with Matthew Stafford and company leading the way. After closing the 2007 season so strong, we started out the 2008 season as the number one team in the country. That lasted exactly 1 week. We started off kind of poorly at the beginning of our season. We lost votes and fell out of number one, though we hadn't lost. With the next game or two, same thing happened, and we continued eroding votes, even though we hadn't lost a game, till we fell to number 3. And then some of you might remember number 8, Alabama, came to town and just embarrassed us in a terrible rainy game. That the only good thing that happened was Nick Chubb broke off like an 70 or 80-yard touchdown in the rain. That Alabama players, including Kirby Smart as coach, so he wasn't a player, but he was the defensive coordinator then, were still bothered by it. I mean, they were pitching a shutout and they were holding us to nothing. And they particularly had set their sights on stopping Chubb, because Chubb was, the best running back out there and just so dynamic. And they had that goal of keeping him under 100 yards. And he ripped off the one big run in the rain for a touchdown. And we at least scored a touchdown, and he got over 100 yards. And that kind of made the folks at Alabama mad. So, but I mean, great, like we still got embarrassed basically in that game. So that was the other time we were number one, is the preseason poll, the first poll of the 2008 season. So those are all your weeks listed out of number one, but that gives you a little perspective. And, like I said, Alabama, 141 weeks, Ohio State and Oklahoma all still over 100 weeks. So in our history, we're only halfway to where those guys have been in the history of holding down the number one spot. And I think that's really cool. I think it's been impressive for me as a football fan, Georgia fan, sports fan, college football fan, and historian. I look at that history and I want to share that with you. A lot of you may know that, but I think it's an interesting tidbit. And so I am keeping an eye on the Texas situation, because I'm really proud of the fact that we leapt with 39 weeks at number one in recent seasons, all the way from, and 15th, by the way, just to give you some, I didn't tell you that, Washington currently is 22nd on the all-time list, University of Washington, with 15 weeks. So we would still be down without that run. If we had not ascended to number one and went through that, we would be down. If that had never happened and you just had our previous historical record, we would be down around 22nd or so. And again, that gives you this idea of when you add up all of the markers of what makes a team one of the elite teams in the history of college football, it's hard to claim you're one of the 10 best teams or 5 best teams in the history of college football if you are somewhere all the way back down in the 20s, of the rankings of time at number one. Give you some perspective, some other teams that are down there. Auburn, 9 weeks at number one, 23rd all time. Oregon, 16 weeks, 21st. Our good friends from Knoxville, Tennessee, 18 weeks in their history at number one, makes them 19th all time. Clemson is 25th, they're 16th all time with 25 weeks at number one. And Michigan, you might be happy to know, has only ever spent 36 weeks ranked at number one for 13th all time. So, okay, so that's enough on number one. Although it does tie into another historical idea I wanted to throw out, which is national championships. And I made mentions a minute ago. I wasn't going to get into this, or I felt like leaving this alone. I don't know. I've been back and forth. Some of you may have heard the news that just before the start of the season here, Auburn has decided to claim additional championships. They historically have only listed the 2 championships that are pretty straightforward. In 1957, they won the national championship. They were, I think, pretty much unanimous in all the polls and everything. 1957, and then, of course, we saw them win it with Cam Newton in 2010. Most of you probably even remember that. So those were their 2 national championship seasons. They have decided that they are going to claim every possible national championship season So they announced recently that they're now claiming 7 additional national champions, going all the way back into the 1910-11 time frame, and also including the 2004 season when they went undefeated but got left out of the then BCS game, and have a legitimate argument that they might have been the best team in the country because of what happened there. And again, that's a different historical discussion. We'll dig into that one day, somewhere in the future, maybe in the off season, as far as what happened in that game and what happened that season. I think it's interesting to go back and look at some of those seasons, remember. But they probably had an argument there. They also had, you might remember in the Terry Bowden era in the 90s, they had a season where they were on probation and went 11-0, but they were not eligible to play in a bowl game. They were not eligible to be considered number 1 in the AP poll or to be named national champion. So I don't even think that actually is in their list of the ones that they counted. But they're claiming 7 different national championships. And one thing to also throw out there, many of you might be aware of this, but national championships, like everything in the sport of college football, are completely unregulated. There's no official. The NCAA doesn't come out with a thing and say, here's your national championship trophy as bequeathed by the NCAA. Congratulations. They do in other sports, but not in football. Football is currently the national championship decider has been, we've all agreed, and by we I mean like our teams and conferences have agreed to accept this playoff format, and the winner of the playoff will be that team. And generally speaking, the coaches poll and the AP poll, which are independent of the playoff, but have been around for a long time, they generally join in and agree that whichever team wins the playoff they're going to put them number 1 in their final poll. And there's other people that bequeath championships and trophies around college football, like the Football Writers Association of America and some others. If you came to the celebrations especially I remember the 2021 first championship celebration that was there in Sanford Stadium in the freezing cold weather in January, and where Greg Sankey was there from the SEC office, and Jerry Moorhead and Kirby, and everybody was out, and Josh Brooks, our athletic director, everybody came out and we had a big celebration. You might remember there was a bunch of trophies there. And that might, and I could actually be confused. I could be thinking about the second one, the back-to-back celebration. But whichever one it was, they brought out the trophies, and there was the Football Writers trophy, I think, and trophy from one of the polls, plus the trophy you're used to seeing with a college football playoff trophy, the little gold thing, or not the little gold thing, but the big gold little column that's shaped like the football at the top that you can take out of the base. Anyway, those trophies were all there because those all get bequeathed. There's different entities. And throughout history of college football, a number of entities do their own rating system and declare somebody the champion, or at least number 1 at the end of the year. And there's been bunches of them, dozens. And some have come and some have gone. Some have been around for decades. But there's been a lot of them throughout time. And all they had to do, the NCAA recognizes that these entities have reached out to the NCAA at some point and said, hey, I have a system for rating and deciding who's the national champion. And the NCAA has accepted a lot of those throughout time. And so they said, okay, here's an entity that we have looked at their material, and they present a national championship, and we're going to accept that this is a team, an organization or a thing. And by organization, it might be one guy. There's been a thing that used to be around. I remember when I first started learning about college football history and polls and everything, like the Cooley Matrix was this guy named Cooley who just developed this formula for deciding who's the best team in the country. And there's been a lot of that kind of stuff going back well into the early 1900s. Guys sitting down doing some math and saying, hey, I figured it out. This is the best team. So these people have, if they've gotten the attention of the NCAA and said, we bequeath a champion by whatever system we come up with, and the NCAA has just recognized those. So if you go back and you look at our 1980 national championship, and at the time, we don't say this as much now because of the BCS era and then the playoff era, where we now feel like there's a single clear national champion. But a lot of you might remember Georgia Tech in 1990 was a split national champion. They were the national champion of the coaches poll, or the UPI poll as it used to be called, and Colorado was the champion of the AP poll. And there were other entities along with those that declared each of them national champion. In 1980, we were considered the consensus national champion. You'd hear that term all the time because there was maybe a dozen different organizations, including the AP and coaches poll, that bequeathed national championships. And we basically were declared champion by going undefeated and beating Notre Dame and having basically all of the key organizations, or almost all of them, if not all of them, had declared us national champions. So, and there's a list. So when you look on the list in the history books, and it says, 1980 champion Georgia, UGA, and then you look out, and there'll be all these initials for all of these organizations that are listed there that made us the quote unquote consensus national champion. So there hasn't always been a consensus. And the AP poll, which has become for many people before the BCS and before the playoff system, the AP poll has for many people been the gold standard. But as I mentioned before, they didn't start the AP poll until 1936. So there's a whole lot of football from the late 1800s all the way up to the 1930s, 50, 60 years of potential champions that were named by various entities that had nothing to do with the polls the way we know it today. So Auburn has reached back into history and through different seasons and basically decided that anybody who's ever suggested that Auburn had a championship team, they're going to take it, claim it. They had not before. They had only stuck to the very clear consensus 2 national championships that they had before, which was the 57 and the 2010. So now they've added 7. And by jumping to 7 national championships, you might not be surprised to know that throws them way up into the rankings of all-time teams claiming national championships. I'm sure most of you have noticed over the last few years the 18 on the Alabama helmet every time they have a helmet sitting there on game day, signifying Alabama's 18 national championships. And then Michigan sits in some books. And again, these are very fluid because it's not clear which ones count and which ones don't and who's counting them. But in most cases, it is actually, unbelievably, what Auburn did is kind of typical because what usually happens is the school decides themselves which national championships that have been named from all these different entities they're claiming. And Auburn before had taken a very conservative viewpoint and was only claiming consensus championships. Now they've decided, let's take them all. So they added 7 to the roster, gives them 9. 9 all of a sudden vaults Auburn from being somewhere down in the below the 25th all time in national championships, 26th or 33rd, something like that. Now they're 5th with 9 claimed national championships. That puts them right there with Ohio State, and Pitt of all teams also claims 9. And then ahead of them, USC, Southern Cal claims 11, Notre Dame claims 11, Michigan claims 12, and Alabama claims 18. And as you might know or have noticed, we claim 4. So, I was tempted at first. I mean, I kind of chuckled and I texted some of my Auburn buddies and I was like, hey, you guys going to go roll Toomer's Corner now that you guys just got 7, or do you roll it 7 days in a row to celebrate each of your new national championships? And a little bit of a ha-ha back and forth there, right? But, but part of me understands the idea. That what I will say is and part of the reason I bring this up in this conversation is to say, in the context of the best teams of all time, and you look at all the other markers, Auburn is nowhere near 5th in any other category. Not in all-time wins, not in ranked in the top 25, not in ranked in the top 10, not ranked in the number 1. And I think it's actually kind of funny because they have been ranked for a total of 9 weeks in their history. And this is what jumped out of the page when I started putting this together to talk to you guys about it. They've been ranked 9 weeks total in their history, number 1 in the AP poll, and now they also are claiming 9 national championships. So again, kind of a big imbalance there, right? I mean, we have 4 national championships we're claiming, and we've spent 54 weeks ranked at number 1. We are in that top 10 in that stat, and Auburn is, not really on the chart. And yet they're up there now with their 9 claimed national championships among the greatest teams in history. So, that begs a question. should we be claiming more national championships? And I will tell you, so I'll give Auburn some credit here. I will tell you that I have always believed, actually, that we should be claiming more national championships. I think we have left some meat on the bone in a big way that we probably shouldn't have. I mean, I'm not sure why we've decided to do this. And also, I alluded to this just a minute ago, but it really is team by team. So Alabama's 18. I mean, you can kind of guess this without my having to tell you. Maybe you knew this and you'd heard about it before. Alabama's 18 national championships definitely come by basically claiming almost every entity that ever, at any time, anybody ever thought Alabama might be a champion. And a lot of them also go back into ancient history before the AP poll and stuff like that. So a lot of them have also been in the AP poll era. Don't get me wrong. They have been a dominant team up and down history, and they certainly earn their place. I mean, again, they've got all the stats, all-time wins, weeks at number 1, weeks in the top 25. So there's no poking fun at Alabama or the record, but they have been very liberal in claiming the championships. And they basically had the same kind of revelation, and it just happened kind of a long time ago. Somebody in their sports media department, I've heard the story. I've been to the Alabama football museum. Confession, my wife is an Alabama grad. And so we have spent years trying to sort of toe the line between both schools. When we first got married, it wasn't that big a deal. We didn't play Alabama very much, and they were not the main impediment to us winning anything. But, nowadays it seems like a much bigger problem. Frankly, in the early days of sort of getting to glom onto Alabama football, I enjoyed watching them beat Florida when we didn't and, getting to see a national championship won. So I'm not saying I ever switched sides. I've always been a dedicated, diehard Bulldog fan and wanted this greatness for Georgia. But, I mean, you have to have peace in the home, right? So anyway, the 18 national championships they claim are very liberal. And I heard the story when I was at the Alabama Football Museum. And it's basically, one of their sports information people was just kind of looking at the record books one day, and they're like, hey, there's all these entities that said we were national champion in this year or that year or this year. We should put those in the sports information guide. He actually didn't go, I think the story was he didn't necessarily jump all the way to like, we're going to put banners all over the stadium, say national champions these days. He just started including it in the media guide, like, hey, here's for the program for the season, and here's some teams that maybe historically you didn't think about a lot, but somebody thought they were national champion, and then it kind of stuck, and then they claimed them, and it just kind of went from there. To their credit, I would point out other schools like and Notre Dame, by the way, pretty much claims all the championships they could. But Ohio State, to their credit, claims 9 national championships right now, along with Auburn, and I believe that I've read that they have 5 or 6 other times where some entity suggested that they were national champion, and they've left those behind. So Ohio State could one day decide, we're tired of being stuck at 9 and sharing space with Auburn. Let's get those other 6 national championships and add them to our banners, and then we'll have 15, and we'll be second behind Alabama. Who knows? They may decide to do that any day. But I do think, as a Georgia fan, I have almost all the time that I have been a rabid Georgia fan, I became aware as a history buff of this history, and I think we probably should be claiming more than we did. And a couple I'll tell you about. So in 1920, we had an undefeated team that was, an excellent team. And I'm trying to find the details about it. Here we go. Let's see. So 1920, let me tell you what else was the perspective there. So in 1920, a whole slew of teams were picked by some entity to be national champion. And one of the things that happened back then, by the way, is teams didn't play as many games. They didn't play 12 games. They didn't have a uniform set of games. Some teams played 6 games. Some teams played 9 games. So it was all over the place, right? So here are the teams in 1920 that were declared national champion by somebody: California, Georgia, Harvard, Notre Dame, and Princeton. Those teams went in that order: California 9-0, Georgia 8-0-1, Harvard 8-0-1, Notre Dame 9-0, and Princeton 6-0-1. So they were all undefeated. Georgia, Harvard, and Princeton all had ties. Harvard and Princeton, I didn't look this up, but most likely tied each other because they do play, I think, every year. I don't know who we tied. I haven't gone back and looked through the schedule. But so, look, you had 5 undefeated teams. None of them played each other. Nobody saw these teams on TV. No 2 sports writers or people who named these teams national champions probably even saw, maybe didn't even see one of these teams play, much less than in any 2 of them. So California had 5 different entities that named them national champion. Georgia had 1, Harvard had 1, Notre Dame and Princeton each had 2. So, I think that's a pretty fair, and a note that I saw somewhere says that Stegman was the Stegman of Stegman Coliseum and used to be the Stegman Gym, which is no longer gone. It was torn down and the new part of Tate Center was added to that. But anyway, Stegman led the program. They were undefeated and they outscored their opponents 250-17. That's a pretty dominant performance. So I don't know there's any way to judge which team was really better out of those 5 undefeated teams. If those were the only 5 undefeated teams, I don't know that either. But it sounds like a pretty dominant team. And so there was an entity that said we should have been national champion. Sounds like it was a pretty dominant team. They went undefeated. I say claim it. 1920 sounds like a title to me. 1927, the note says, was they called it the Dream and Wonder team, led by George Woodruff. Went 9-1, and they beat Yale and Connecticut, which were considered some of the top teams in the country back then, which is sort of hard to believe. The downside is we did lose to Georgia Tech, 12-0 in that season. And that's always right near the end of the season, as you know. And anyway, those, but still 2 different polls from that season called us national champion. And who knows? So wait, that was 1927. So let me tell you who else and what was going on. So 1927, Georgia, Illinois, Notre Dame, Texas A&M, and Yale were all considered national champion by somebody. We went 9-1, Illinois 7-0-1, Notre Dame 7-1-1, Texas A&M 8-0-1, Yale 7-1. So, and we beat Yale. Yale was one of the teams that was named national champion. So I mean, we beat and played Yale in that season. So why not? Yeah, I could take it. National champion, 1927. 1942, we are claiming the national championship, even though we were not named the champion in the AP poll. So by 1942, you did have an AP poll. And I believe, Ohio State was named the AP champion. Another poll thought 8-1-1 Wisconsin should be number 1. We went 11-1 that season. And 7 different entities thought we should be number 1. And for a long time, we didn't claim that. But Vince Dooley came to be aware of the fact that the NCAA listed those 7 entities. He said, we'll put it in the record books. So they did. For whatever reason, they didn't choose to take the 1946 team. A lot of the same guys from 1942 went off to the war. They came back after the war. They reformed, and they were still a kick-ass team. And they went undefeated that year, 1946. And they were the SEC champions. They played in the Sugar Bowl. They beat North Carolina. And we got left out. So it was one of those teams that kind of like, and really what happened is Army and Notre Dame were considered by the national media, which was very Chicago and New York centric, right? The national media said Army and Notre Dame were the 2 greatest teams ever. They played each other to a 0-0 tie, I think, that year. It was a tie, I know that, but it might have been a 0-0 tie, or maybe it was like a 3-0 tie or a 7-0 tie. I should look that up. But either way, they played each other to a tie, and Notre Dame ultimately at 8-0-1 was declared the AP national champion, and by about 8 other entities. Army was also declared national champion by about 6 other entities at 9-0-1. And we went undefeated. And we were generally left out by the big polls, but a poll called the Williamson poll, which was around for a long time, said we were national champion. And again, media bias, I think, just assumed that Army and Notre Dame were great, just bequeathed them the championship, even though they played to a 0-0 slugfest against each other and considered the greatest game of all time that was talked about. We went undefeated. We're the SEC champion, won the Sugar Bowl, and, had every reason, I think, to have a reasonable claim to number 1. So I think we should claim that one too. The only other one, then that we've already claimed 1980 to 2021 and 2022. So the only other one that's sketchy that I don't think we should claim, 1968, Vince Dooley, second SEC championship team. Vince Dooley took over in 64, 65. So this was his second SEC title. The Bulldogs in the regular season went 8-0-2. So they were undefeated in the regular season with 2 ties. Vince Dooley had kind of a reputation for playing for the tie, by the way, when the tie existed. But ultimately lost our bowl game. We played in the Sugar Bowl against Arkansas, who was not part of the SEC back then. And so we played them in the Sugar Bowl, and we lost 16-2. But the Lichtenhouse poll, which was a guy named Lichtenhouse who had his formula for coming up with national champions, he still thought by his formula, which was very mathematic-based, he still thought we were national champion. So he declared us national champion. And so that is in the NCAA record book. So we could claim it, but, I would actually leave that one behind because 2 ties and a loss doesn't seem like a very impressive record to get behind and say, oh, yeah, we were definitely national champion. And for perspective, what else happened that season? Well, Ohio State went 10-0. And Texas went 9-1-1. So Ohio State was largely the consensus national champion in the AP poll, UPI, which became the coaches poll, the football writers poll, which is widely respected. So they were essentially the consensus national champion at 10-0. A couple of different entities named Texas instead of Ohio State the national champion at 9-1-1. And I wouldn't feel too excited about claiming a national champion there at 8-1-2. That just doesn't sound like. So I'd leave that one behind. So if I had my way and I was in charge of our claiming naming system, we would also add to the 1942, 1980, 1921, and 1922 national champions the 1920, 27, and 46 national champions, which would springboard us up, since you can probably do that math pretty easily in your head, that would spring us up to 7 national championships, which would put us, by the way, in a tie with Minnesota, who has a slew of national champions from before the dawn of time, because many of you probably didn't realize Minnesota was ever any good. Although you might have heard about how Minnesota was the last team to win 3 back-to-back national championships way back in the dark ages of time or whatever. And that was talked about a lot when we started the 2023 season with a chance at being a triple back champion. So Minnesota has 7 claimed national championships, and Oklahoma probably pretty legitimately has 7 claimed national championships. And so they're tied for 8th all time in that category. So we would go from our current position, which is 18th all time with 4, which is a little below our standing in all other measures of the greatness of the history of Georgia football. All those factors I talked about already, so I won't repeat them. We're down at 18th with only 4 national championships, sharing that space with Georgia Tech, who, by the way, I should point out with great respect, has at least 3 or 4 or 5 national championships they could be claiming that they're not. They claim 4 that are pretty legit, and they could be claiming another 3 to 5 or something like that. I'd have to go back and look it up, but they have also left those behind. So us and Georgia Tech share 4, LSU has 4, and Texas is claiming 4. So that's the group of us who are all tied for 18th down there. And we're behind Nebraska, Miami, Iowa, Illinois, Cal, and Army. And then Tennessee, Michigan State have 6 each they're claiming. So we would leap up back into the top 10 if we claim those 3 national championships. And I think it would be more befitting of our overall status. So, all right. Well, that went a little longer, but I hope you found that an interesting historical lesson. We really covered a lot of the detail about this week's game and the opponent and standing and where we are coming into the season. We covered those on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday podcasts. So coming into today's game, this is just a little historical perspective on Georgia football, and I will offer that often. I really enjoy that part of it, and you'll find that I'll find little places to put that together. I'm sure we'll have much more game stuff to go over when we play headier opponents than Marshall. I already alluded to the idea that I think 51-10, I wrote that in one of the written segments, I think, this week, if you follow that, is roughly where I'm coming in on my prediction of what will happen. I think the Dogs are going to play well. I think they'll do the checklist that we talked about. I think they'll try to get guys in the game. They'll get Gunner good and warmed up. I think he'll have an excellent day. I expect us to, rack up, 45, 50 something points, 500 and something yards. I'm looking for the defense to make a statement, hold Marshall under 285 yards. I'd like to see a 250 yard differential. Once we get our third, fourth string guys and a lot of guys in on defense, and we've had too much time with the other team having the ball because we score quickly, I wouldn't be surprised if Marshall ekes out a touchdown in there. I mean, 10 points, 13 points. I'd hate to see him score that much. We could pitch the shutout. We could hold them to 7 or 3, but I'm going to land in the middle at the moment and think 51-10. But again, that's not really super important, right? It could be all over the place with this game. So, I think I was going to go through and talk about, but it's we're too long and we're nearing the end of the time. I want to keep you guys. So maybe we'll do this another time. We'll look at historically where Georgia teams have been. One other couple things I mentioned, the streak at number 1. I mentioned this the other day. I said 30, around 30. It's worth noting coming into the season in this game, we have the nation's longest home streak. So of all our streaks, like winning streak and streak at number 1 and all these things that we lost over the last year or two, last year, we still have the 32 game home winning streak. We haven't lost since the 2019 season at home in a very frustrating South Carolina game. And we're not going to lose tomorrow either. So that streak will go to 33, and then the week after that against Austin Peay will go to 34. So obviously then we'll play on the road against Tennessee, and we'll come home after an off week and play Alabama in the last weekend in September, and that'll give us a chance to get to 30, to get to 35. And obviously that's the pivot game there. Then we still have Texas and Ole Miss coming to town along with Kentucky, and so I mean, to run the table, if we get past the Alabama game, then we could run the table. But obviously, we still have to beat Ole Miss, and I think we can do that. Texas, I'm not saying we can't, but obviously they're going to present a strong challenge. So an undefeated season at home is going to be a real feat this year because of how many good opponents are coming to Sanford Stadium. But if we do it, that would be 7 home games, and that would take the home winning streak up to 39. And I have to look ahead and see what our opener is, but probably we have a strong chance. If we get to 39, we have a strong chance to getting into the 40s. So if we get past this season. And so again, for some historical perspective, 39 would get us tied with Oklahoma for the 11th longest home winning streak of all time. And if we got to 40 or beyond, then we move into the top 10, tying streaks by Notre Dame, Florida, Texas that have 40 and 42 wins all time. So that would also be an interesting long-term historical perspective. We are already 8th all time with our 29 game win streak that Alabama ended last year. So again, just another one of those nice little historical markers. So there's an update on that. And last I think we'll just call it there. Like I said, I was going to dig into some of our openers and talk about how the teams have played and different openers throughout the Kirby era. Different seasons have been, we've played top-ranked teams in neutral site games. We've played some of these, easy games at home. The last time we had a game like this, we opened, I think, against Tennessee Tech at home, and largely we did exactly what I think the score was like 49-7, and same I talked about, probably about 500 and something yards of offense against a couple hundred yards on defense, and generally we played well. Although we didn't start off the season, we started kind of losing some credibility when we turned around and started not beating opponents quite as heavily right after that. So, we'll see. Anyway, that's a little bit of perspective. But mostly this week, we're just going to do history as we look forward to just seeing the Dogs run out on the field tomorrow, getting the crowd juiced up, and breaking in a new quarterback, breaking in some new guys in different positions out there, and just really enjoying and celebrating Georgia football. Oh, I do remember. I wanted to share this too. I also think this is significant. If you follow the SEC media guides, they do a good job of also giving you some historical perspective. In the last year or so, they keep a nice record of how teams in the SEC have done in the last 5 years and in the last 10 years. And it gets updated every week. But last year, Georgia took over from Alabama the lead in the 5-year record. Georgia is 52-5 in the last 5 complete seasons, a 9-12 winning percentage, having gone to 4 bowl games, appeared in 4 SEC championship games, won 2 SEC champions, 2 national champions, and finished in the AP Top 25 all 4 complete seasons. So Alabama now is at second at 45-9. So we used to trail that, now we don't. If you look at the 10-year mark, Alabama, so this is, again, a little perspective going into the season, on where we sit over these last 5-10 years. If you look at the 10-year mark, Alabama is still out there ahead of us over the last 10 seasons, which goes back to the 2016 season coming into this season. Alabama is 110-14, or an 887 winning percentage in the last 10 years. Georgia is 104-19. Again, to compare these teams to the rest of the SEC, Oklahoma, which wasn't in the SEC for those 10 years, but they are 89-29 in the last 10 years, compared to Alabama's 110-14 and Georgia's 104-19. LSU's 82-34, Texas 75-42. So you can see it drops off in a hurry. On the 5-year side, actually, Ole Miss is third behind Alabama, 39-13 in the last 5 years, again compared to our 52-5, and Alabama's 45-9. And then Tennessee at 37-15, and Texas behind them at 38-17. So at the 10-year mark, LSU is the only team other than Alabama to have a national championship along with us. So Alabama still has 3 national championships in their last 10 years, 6 SEC championships, so 6 SEC game appearances, and bowl games and AP Top 25 finishes every year, which Georgia shares. Georgia had 7 SEC championship appearances in the last 10 years, but only 3 championships. So Alabama is 100% on that. We are not. And again, we have the 2 national championships. The only other team close is 4th place LSU at 82-34, and their 10-year record has been to 2 SEC championship games at that time, 1 and 1 national championship. So, all right. So again, that's our historical look at, breakdown, thoughts as we head into the season. Really excited to be talking about some football after we've seen football played the next time we get back together. Hope you guys have a great game day. It's Saturday in Athens. What could be better? What could be finer? So enjoy yourselves. Have a great time. Enjoy some of the other games out there. I will remind you, Carson Beck plays starting for Miami against Notre Dame on Sunday night. So, we can watch our game, go to the game, do whatever you want, and still settle in and see how Carson does if you're interested. Most importantly, go Dogs.